Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hammer Museum. I'm Claudia Bester. I am the Director of Public Programs here at the museum, and I'm really, really, really thrilled for tonight's program with Nan Dan artist Mou Yuandi. This is a one-of-a-kind program. This is the first time Mr. Mou has done anything like this. He's created this whole evening just for us, and I think you're all going to find it's really very special. We're going to have an opportunity to hear Mou's story about how he became involved in Chinese opera, his education as an artist, some of the conflicts that he came across along the way, and all of this is going to be interspersed with short performances that are specifically illustrating different points that he's making and different aspects of his craft. So I think that along with demystifying some aspects of Chinese opera for American audiences, more importantly, we're all going to have a chance to see the exquisite detail and perfection of movement and emotion and sound that make Mr. Mou a truly great artist. Tonight's performance was made possible by the very wonderful Wei Wang, who's over there in the corner. He brought Mou Yuandi to the United States to perform for our audiences. It's also made possible by my wonderful colleagues at the UCLA Confucius Institute, Dr. Susan Jane Patel and Xiaojie Ma. Dr. Jane is going to introduce Mr. Mou with some helpful background information, and she's going to reappear later to help give some historical context as well as tell us about some of the decorative aspects of the traditional Chinese opera dress. Dr. Susan Patel Jain is the executive director of the UCLA Confucius Institute. She holds degrees in Chinese language and in Asian theater. She studied Beijing opera performance under Elizabeth Wickman and Madame Yang Qiuling, a disciple of Mei Langfang. She studied regional opera performance in China, and her dissertation was on the musical structure of Sichuan opera performance. Dr. Jain has worked in both the academic and professional theater worlds and served on the curatorial staff of several international arts festivals, including the LA Festival and the Smithsonian Institute's Silk Road Festival. Before coming to UCLA, she taught courses on Asian theater and produced the work of immigrant artists from China, including Quinchu artist Hua Wenyi, who she successfully nominated to become a National Heritage Fellow with the NEA. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Susan Patel Jain.
Good evening, everyone. This is really such a wonderful opportunity. It's a real treat. It's how many of you have seen Chinese opera performed on the stage before? Okay, so several of you have seen the form already. For me, what is I find the most interesting is seeing the backstage, is seeing the artist unveil, to see the artist preparing for the performance, and you really will have an understanding, hopefully by the end of the evening, how incredibly well-trained these artists are. I don't think that there's anything more difficult in the world in performing arts traditions as a Chinese theater performer. Shichu literally translates as theater of song, and it's the representative theater tradition of China, but it is not a single tradition. Actually, Shichu, which we translated into English as Chinese opera, includes over 300, maybe up to 350 discrete forms. Most of these forms are regional in nature, and other than the only two forms, Beijing opera and Quinchu, are national forms, and they have broad audience bases which span the entire country. In English, although Shichu is translated as opera, it really doesn't reflect the multidisciplinary nature of the tradition. Shichu requires their artists to become skillful singers, dancers, actors, as well as warriors on stage. It used to be an itinerant tradition, which troops of actors would travel from place to place, sometimes setting up a stage in a marketplace, sometimes performing on stages attached to temples, sometimes performing in the imperial palace or in the salons of the wealthy and educated. Because it was a mobile tradition, the artists had to create the performance with their bodies, with their voices, with their music. So it really became focused on the training of the actor. They had to create on a bare stage. They had to be able to transform the space into a mountaintop. They had to make you believe that they are in a beautiful garden and they're seeing a peony for the first time. So it really became the focus of the actor and the training of the actor and reliance on the actor and the musicians to create the performance. So it's very much actor focused. As in many parts of the world, it was frowned upon for women to become stage artists. Like the Shakespearean stage, as well as the kabuki, the Noh theater, it was not unusual to see men taking up performing the female roles on the stage. And this was the tradition in China, and really until really 1949, when we saw the rise of the Chinese Communist Party, which we call that, and many people call that New China and Old China. After 1949, Mao Zedong, they set up opera schools. They set up systems where young artists could be trained, where young artists could receive an education to learn how to read and write. And at that time, women were encouraged to become artists, stage artists, and to take over performing those female roles. So tonight we have a wonderful opportunity to not only to look back into China, into China's past, the history of Beijing opera, to look at the role of the female impersonator, the male artist performing the female roles, which in Chinese is termed Nan Dan. Mou Yuandi is an extraordinary young artist. He's from Shanghai. And he is going to introduce his tradition, but also introduce himself and his life and his story. And that is something I've never had the pleasure to see a Chinese artist present on a public stage. So this is really a unique experience for all of us. So without further ado, let me introduce Mou Yuandi.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mou Yuandi. I come from Shanghai Traditional Opera Academy. 我将要给大家讲一个京剧的故事，京剧南旦的故事，还有我的故事。在中国，戏曲是最古老的戏剧形式。那么京剧是戏曲中的代表，至今有200年的历史，被人们誉为国粹。这是过去的 stage 戏台，古戏台。京剧舞台上的演员分为4个行当，第一个是生 man， second 是旦 or woman， 净 flower face， 丑 the funny people。 在封建社会，女性 woman 不允许登台演出，那么舞台上的旦就必须由男人来扮演，那么人们把男性旦角演员就称之为男旦。男性演员本着跨越性别的艺术表现力，缔造了京剧艺术的高峰。著名的梅兰芳大师就是一名京剧男旦，他不仅是中国京剧的代表人物，更是整个中华戏曲艺术的代表人物。然而，随着时间的推进，越来越多的女演员出现在了京剧舞台上，逐渐替代了男旦演员的位置。上世纪50年代，京剧男旦已经处于断层的培养。到90年代，青年京剧男旦已经绝迹京剧舞台。But 有一些人就是为京剧男旦而生的，比如我就是其中之一。I'm a boy, but on stage, I must play the woman. This is my job. 我学习京剧的经历十分的偶然。10岁那年，我所就读的小学来了2名老师，是吉林市青少年宫的京剧班老师，他们是来招学京剧的学生的。当时我非常的大胆，噌就到了前面，演唱了一段革命样板戏《红灯记》当中的李铁梅唱段，都有一颗红亮星。没有人教我。I heard English sang when I was young. I listened to radio, waiting for my favorite songs. But I'm very no son at Beijing Opera. The radio is my first teacher. Yeah. 我天生自己学的这个京剧呢，使得2位京剧老师非常的惊奇，然后看了我的 face and body， 非常适合学习旦角。我的家人也比较支持我学戏。When I was 10 years， 我考进了吉林省戏曲学校，学习京剧旦行表演。在 last century 90年代，全国的院校都没有招收男旦的学生，可以说我是第一个考进戏校的男旦学生。学习京剧的第一步就是它的4功舞法，哪4功呢？就是唱 is sing， first sing 唱 ，second 念 is speaking， third 做 action， 第4个打就是 beat。 This is my photo. 唱是中国京剧表演艺术的核心，它和念、做、打是综合在一起表演的。下面我就为大家演唱一段我们京剧的经典剧目《贵妃醉酒》。Next, I will sing a famous Beijing opera performance《贵妃醉酒》。But before learn the song, first let's practice waltz. Waltz 抬、倒、低、轮、出、转、沉。前辈男旦艺术家为了掩盖自己的性别，在舞台上扮演女性的时候，是用假声来演绎女性声音的。可以说，观众完全听不出 是男人在演唱。这是一种极具天赋条件加上勤学苦练的艺术嗓音。这是中国的4大名旦：梅兰芳 behind， 尚小云 sit is 程砚秋 is 荀慧生，梅尚程荀。4大名旦是中国京剧艺术巅峰的时候的代表性人物，就是京剧男旦。然而到了15岁的时候，我进入了每一个人都必须要经过的时期，青春期。我的声音变声了，一夜之间我就不能登台演唱了，从一个班级的主演一下子变成了没有用的人。我身边的同学都在嘲笑我，因为我不能演出了，我不能再唱男旦了。而且很多人认为京剧男旦是旧社会留下的产物，不应该在当下生存。 My classmate mother says to me, if I am her son, 她打死我也不让我学男旦。这句话对我的触动很深，我的印象很深刻。他们为什么这么想呢？是因为他们认为男旦是旧社会留下的艺术怪胎，在当下有女演员了，干嘛还要男人来演女人呢？他们的思想很简单，他们没有看到男旦表演艺术的价值。在长达5年的时间里，我不能演唱。Yeah, it's 3 important things I forgot. If I really her son, I have no chance to come here, show my performance to you, and tell you my story. Thank you. 在长达5年的时间里，我不能唱了，因为我变声了。但是，我可以练习做，唱念做打，做 very important things。做就是 action, use eye, face, body, arm, hand, leg, foot。中国京剧前辈男旦艺人为了再现妇女的3寸金莲，研究出来了这种鞋子 These shoes, very small and beautiful。 这个鞋子 This shoe's name is 敲，这是一个训练起来非常疼非常难 very hard very hard practice， 很多人都不愿意学，所有的女孩子 my classmate the girls afraid it's very hard, but I rather practice the shoes。演员穿这种鞋子，只有脚尖着地，脚跟踩在木头上，脚心踩在木头上，脚跟是悬空的。它的难度很大，被誉为我们中国东方芭蕾。这门技艺在中国已经面临失传。 我是整个上海唯一能演出这个敲功的演员。When I try stand, but I can't stand. So I hurt. I must try stand, keep, then can walk and run.下面我将表演京剧的一个片段，叫《战返城》。It's old woman in her home, nothing to do, but nothing to do must find something to do. 2000年，我中专毕业了，我到了哈尔滨经卷，在那里当学员。很多人并不看好我。首先，我还是没有我的嗓音。他们也认为京剧男旦是不应该留存于当今社会的。我练习的时候，他们甚至会阻挠我、干预我 ，love me。所以，我只能偷偷的练。那是我最艰难的时期 ，very very low。2004年，我悄悄地报考了北京戏曲艺术学院，以名列前茅的专业和文化的成绩，顺利地考取。就在众人诧异的同时，我的嗓音也恢复了。Listen, my teacher. His name is Li Xihong. Remember, last photo have a Shang Xiaoyun. Yeah. He is Shang Xiaoyun's student. And I am his student. Is my teacher's teacher is Shang Xiaoyun. 我跟李老师 I learned for him only 3 years. And he always left me. 2007, he was died. I very miss him and thanks my teacher. 昆曲被称为百戏之母。我到了北京，有幸，it's please. Yeah. If I can, my voice is back. So I can go on stage again. So I must have my right mouth. A woman, the beautiful things is make up herself. And I am a boy. 好，昆曲是中国的戏曲的被称之为百戏之母的剧种。它有500年的历史，起源于苏州的昆山，所以被称之为昆曲。我到了北京学习之后，非常有幸学习到了昆曲。这是昆曲大师韩世昌。The woman is my teacher. 但是今年他已经70多岁了，这是他17岁的时候。下面我将为大家表演一段昆曲《牡丹亭》。陈凯歌导演有一个非常著名的电影叫做《霸王别姬》，当中就有男旦表演昆曲的片段。下面我就表演一段昆曲《牡丹亭》中的游园。 我完成学业后，顺利的到了上海 Traditional Opera Academy, make a teacher, listen my students. 从2010年开始，我有幸向居住在上海的毕谷云老师学习。毕谷云老师 was born 1930。他是新中国解放之前培养的最后一批京剧男旦。This is my teacher photo. 绿珠坠楼。This performance only 3 men can play. It's 毕谷云老师 and his teacher and me. Yeah, this performance only 3 men can show. No woman can show. 今天在中国青年京剧男旦，全国不会超过6个人。那么在上海，我是唯一的一个。In Shanghai, I'm only one. 京剧观众把尹俊、胡文阁、杨磊 ，It's me， 被称为京剧界新四小男旦。谢谢。接下来，我要为大家表演京剧《天女散花》。在表演京剧《天女散花》之前，我需要现场化妆。Tell you, I slowly became a girl. Okay, yeah.
Over the next few minutes, Mou Yuandi will prepare his headdress for the performance, and I've been asked to sort of give some commentary and sort of go a little bit, fill in some blanks, and make some comments about what you're seeing here. In Chinese opera, all of the artists do their own makeup, and depending on the role type, that length of time varies. From the Cho, you saw there were 4 role types. You had the Dan, was the women, the Shang, or the men. The painted face characters are the Jing, and then the tofu faces, the Cho. So the Cho actually takes the least amount of time to prepare his makeup because it's really just a patch of white in the middle of his face. And of course, the painted face character takes the longest time. That can take over an hour to paint. And you've seen most of those painted face representations sold in Chinatown as masks, but they're actually not. Those are real paintings on the faces of the actors. So the first thing that he will do now to get his headdress on, this is a great tip, ladies. He puts on a little hair piece here with some long cotton bands, and he's actually going to give himself a facelift. He's going to pull up his eyebrows and to make his eyes look wider and more open. And this is really he will set the point where the bands cross in the back of his neck, because if someone else does it and they hit certain pressure points, he can become very nauseous in about 20 minutes. And oftentimes they're on stage, maybe 2 hours, 3 hours, if they're doing a complete performance. So they're very, very careful about doing that first step themselves. So these are the Dan are the only ones who do the facelift. Everybody else has to go au naturel. So there's always a professional hair person who works with the Dan to do these, to get the hair ready, because it's not one piece. It's not like a wig. You'll see, they're individual pieces that are tied on one by one by one. And depending on what the character is, it can be extremely complicated or relatively simple. So there's always a hair person here who is a professional, who specializes in hair, not costume, hair. And this particular hair person is actually a Beijing opera artist herself. She's I heard from the Tianjin Beijing Opera Company, and happens to live in Los Angeles. We're very, very lucky to be home to probably the largest immigrant community of professional Chinese opera artists. They're all out in Arcadia. So anytime you want to go strolling out to the east side on a weekend, you can find a Chinese opera group performing. A little known fact, Chinese opera was actually performed in the state of California before Western opera was. I think the year was 1862. San Francisco, when the miners, the Chinese, the workers came over from southern China, they pooled their money and they brought over a group of Cantonese opera artists who performed in San Francisco. So I often talk, when we talk about learning about Chinese language and culture, here I always say it's not about over there, it's about right here. Because the Chinese community, of course, contributed so much to the founding of the state of California and the United States. Now what he's doing is putting on these side curls, and what they do, these are pieces of natural hair, and what they do is before they put them on the face, they take long pieces of elm bark and they put them in a pan with these hair strips, and then they put hot water. So they basically making like a sap, sort of brewing. The term in Chinese is pao, which is the same word as like brewing tea. So you pao these hair strips, and they're all super slimy. So by the time they go on his face, they're cold and slimy. It's like putting an eel on the side of your head. But they stick to the side. So they're supposed to align right with the jaw. And each artist will move those bands so that they just accentuate perfectly their own face. I asked Mou Yuandi earlier tonight, how did he decide on the particular lines of his makeup? When the Dan performers get ready, they have the same colors, the same patterns. They put their base on, and they'll put the red around the eyes, then they'll put a powder that holds the base on, then they'll put the rouge, and then they do the eyes. And but how you draw your eye, how long, how short, and how much red, this is based on his taste. And he said it's feedback from classmates, feedback from looking in the mirror himself. He said, I decide what I look like. So he's deciding. When the students go into the opera schools, and he mentioned he was offered a scholarship very early, probably 10 years old. That's very typical. So a Chinese opera artist will go 6 to 8 years of full-time conservatory training. So I encourage you to go back and watch the film. Farewell, My Concubine. That's the way it used to be, where mothers often gave up their children, sold them to troops. I've often thought about selling my kids to troops, but I've moved past that. But you can see what it was. And after actually no, just kidding. After in the 1950s, after the Communist Party ascended to power, what they did is they did set up opera schools, and to give children a home and a meal, and they're actually salaried artists from the time they're 10 years old. So they spend half of the day in taking performance classes and half of the day doing history and Chinese language and other subjects. During the World War II, actually Mao Zedong and the Communist Party used Chinese opera very, very effectively to teach people about communism out in the countryside, because at that period of time, most Chinese were illiterate. You couldn't hand out a pamphlet. So Mao was very clever in using the traditional arts and training the young cadres to go out and teach about communism. And if you look back in history and you look at actually Mao's talks at the Yan'an Forum very early on, he will talk about the role of culture and the arts in communism, and he always put it front and center. So it was no surprise later on that during the Cultural Revolution, what did they use to teach about communism? It's like, okay, now you didn't get it. Let's go back and review this. They created the model revolutionary opera pieces. Right, they threw out all the kings and emperors and all of those characters and rewrote new plays, created new plays, which reflected the new communist heroes, the peasants, the workers, and the soldiers. So here again, he's now, this is just I'm not quite sure what the fabric is. It's not hair. It's made out of fabric that they tie around the head to lock everything in. He's probably put bangs on in the front. Right? Okay. So this continues on. So when the children audition for the opera school, they will test them on their flexibility and their vocal range. We'll give them little acting tests to see how quick they are in learning lines, and then they assign you to one of the 4 role types. And once you're in that role type, you're in that role type pretty much for the rest of your life. So if you think of Western opera, where we have the baritones and we have the coloratura sopranos, right? We have the lyric sopranos. The mezzos. It's very similar. They'll divide each role type sort of has an identified associated vocal range. So if you have a very deep sort of a bravura type of voice, chances are you'll be assigned a Jing role, right? You'll be a painted face. It really helps though if you have a nice round big face, so that you can paint that wonderful pattern on, because it won't look good if you have a skinny, pointy face. So usually you can tell Jing performers when they get off the plane, because they have their hair shaved to about here, because they have to create the canvas. Sometimes now they fake it, and they put sort of a fake piece of fabric here in the front, and they paint on it. But the traditional guys will be bald to about here. But the Cho characters, they can have a sort of a skinny face, they can have a round face. Usually those 2 role types, the Jing and the Cho, they play people who are outside the norm. So those are the people who don't embody the traditional Chinese values of sort of filial piety or being humble, graceful. They're usually people who are too good, too big, too brave. The Robin Hoods, the Falstaffs. The clowns can be evil, or they can be funny. But they're not usually the emperor. Okay? An emperor would be played by a sheng, if that character. They would not be the young scholar who's pursuing the imperial examinations. Okay? So a clown. So as soon as as a Chinese opera audience, as soon as you saw that character enter the stage and you saw it was a clown or a painted face character, you would know that they were sort of on the outside some way. Painted face characters, though, can be positive characters. The hegemon king, if you see Farewell, My Concubine, the hegemon king in that is a painted face character. But he also makes a fatal mistake, right, at the very end. So these are, and those patterns that each of those characters have for the painted faces are associated with the character's temperament. So, for example, if you see somebody with a completely white matte face, that's usually someone who's very evil. If it's a gold, lots of gold in the face, that's someone who's magical. Somebody who has a red face might be somebody who's very fiery. So the audience, you as an audience member, you know the game. You know these characters. You've seen these plays hundreds and hundreds of times. So when the artists come in, you start clapping right away. A Chinese opera audience wouldn't sit there quietly. Right now, you should be drinking and eating watermelon seeds, talking to your neighbor. You know, there's always engagement. And sometimes I say that Chinese opera performances are just like American football. You know, because from the outside, it looks like, you know, like what's going on? What are the rules here, right? But once you understand that there are rules, and it's how you play the game. You use these rules and you play the game, and you, as the audience, you know the excitement of 3rd and 2, right? 3rd down and 2 to go, right? You know, you can get really excited about that. So there becomes this communication that happens between the audience and the actors use that knowledge to affect meaning, to you know, make you feel something about their character. So these are sort of agreed upon lies. You never know how it's all going to work out, but you know where you're going. It's like for you, if you were going to see, for example, Hamlet, we don't go to see how it ends, right? We know the story. We go to see how it's performed. And that's very much the emphasis on Chinese opera. You know the plays. You want to see what Mou Yuandi can do with this role tonight. And it would be very typical for the Chinese opera audience to yell, clap, as someone did very early on today, an acknowledgement of something that he did that was wonderful, and maybe even yell out, "Hao," which means good. It's a very interactive experience. So there's still tying up the back of the hair. You'll see in a few minutes he's going to start putting up, he's starting right now. He's putting on like the earrings, and then there'll be flowers, and sometimes there's big rhinestones that they tie on. Each piece is individually, you know, attached. So this is why it takes a long time for the artist to prepare. He talked earlier about the 4 skills of performance. Remember, 唱念做打. There's 4: singing, speech, stylized movement / physical acting, and martial arts. So each artist, depending on their skill set, will focus on roles that emphasize one or more of those role types, one or more of those skills. So not everyone is a great singer, but you might find someone who's a really good actor or someone who's a wonderful martial artist. So they might focus on plays which emphasize those types of skills. How many of you know that Jackie Chan is a Beijing opera actor? 2, 1. Okay, yeah, a couple of people did. Yeah, so yeah, there's this close sort of a continuum. There's this really close connection between the Chinese theater and the martial arts world and kung fu films. How many of you have seen the film Shaolin Temple with Jet Li? That was why that film was so famous. That was the first time that a director had cast martial artists, not Chinese opera artists, in those roles, because they're trained to fight and act. But there was a very close connection between the movement stylization. So someone like Mou Yuandi, he's obviously a very talented singer. He's obviously a wonderful mover, dancer. So I would assume that he would probably focus on roles about sort of refined females, those Confucian daughters, the Duliniangs, those girls who don't show their teeth when they smile. They never directly speak to a young man, you know, are very loyal to their parents. Where if he wasn't such a wonderful singer, but he was a really great actor, there's another sort of a subcategory called flower dan, hua dan, and those are the maids. And they're very perky, and they move around quickly, and they are able to say, they're usually the handmaids of these refined females, and they can say to the young man, like, why don't you come over later tonight and meet my mistress here? They're sort of the matchmakers. So each one has a sort of a different emphasis. So as you go through the opera schools, then you focus on repertoire in your area that emphasize your skills. But the core for the Chinese opera public audience, the traditional audience, it's song. It's the singing plays, which are the core of Chinese opera. And unfortunately now, when you go to China, you go to Beijing and Shanghai as a tourist, they take you to these opera performances, and you see a lot of backflips and Monkey King, and they think that Western audiences can't take it. They won't be able to understand the singing plays. And they're really wonderful, but what you need, and I try to emphasize, is you need good subtitles. Because I think we're able to get into the stories. We just need it to look right, sound right to us. So I'm advocating for upgrading the public subtitling. Oh, she's almost ready. As I mentioned earlier, there's over 300 different types of opera in China, and it's really connected to the local language. What in Chinese they used to say, "I hear theater," not "I see theater." 我听戏, not 我看戏. So this emphasis on the oral identity of an opera form. So if you most opera forms look the same, and if you closed your ears and just watched, you think, well, they're all the same. But for a Chinese opera audience, unless it sounds like Beijing opera, it is not Beijing opera. Unless it's spoken and sung in Cantonese, it is not Cantonese opera. Okay, so there's a very strong regional identity, and this is why Beijing opera is a national form, which is why Kunshu is a national form, is because they're performed in languages which can be understood over large parts of the country. Interestingly, there is an opera form that developed in Shanghai in the 1920s, actually the region around Shanghai, but then really took off in Shanghai, is an all-female form of opera. And even though after 1949 the communists tried to change it and have the women play the female roles and the men play the male roles, the audiences have rejected it. And it continues today to be a form which specializes in romance, but all the roles are played by women. Shanghai Yueju. So she looks beautiful. This is a very typical costume of a fairy or some sort of a heavenly creature. You have these layered skirts. Usually the young Confucian women will wear this other type of robe, which just opens in the front. And they're often pastels. If the character is wearing a black outfit, that means she's poor. Right? If it's white, it means someone has died. The attachments on the ends of the sleeves, they can be of varying length. They're called water sleeves, 水袖, and they're used to express emotion. And they're also used purely for decorative purposes, but they're connected to the performance. And depending on what type of use, the silk will be different. So sometimes they have these really long ones, they're about like 10 feet long, and they use a very heavy type of silk from Hangzhou, they call it hangfang, to make these really long ones so that they come flipping back to you. So in the opera schools, they wear practice robes, and the kids will just learn how to drop the water sleeves and pick them up. Usually 1, 2, drop, 1, 2, and they practice this. But you can see this, he's going to use a different type of, sort of like a water sleeve, but it's not attached to the ends.
最后，我将表演京剧非常有名的京剧片段《天女散花》（The famous performance《天女散花》）。
是把人间做情要紧。
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.